conversations with my participant. Can I bring the therapist? I would bring the therapist into the conversation, right? I would help the therapist to understand that these things are starting to happen. Eviction is now part of the discussion, and help the therapist to be aware of what's going on, and bring the therapist into this process that Naomi now has to go through, right? That would be really beneficial in relation to Naomi being able to process, and Naomi being able to speak to someone who's qualified to move through these conversations and this awareness that needs to happen. That's first and foremost. And I would also, as best as I could, see if the therapist could write some sort of a letter or statement to show the landlord, to prove and to show to the landlord that your tenant is getting therapy, and this is more than just a hoarding issue. There's some trauma behind this. So that's where I would start. And then next, you've all mentioned it, Naomi needs to be part of this, the cleaning up of the apartment. I wouldn't even use the word clear out. I would use words that stem something positive that might help to uplift Naomi, right? In relation to bringing into the awareness. Obviously, Naomi wants to keep moving forward. She's going to therapy, right? So she's on the road to doing what she needs to do. So I would use language that helps in relation to cleaning the apartment up. I would use language that would help Naomi to understand that this is part of that process, and these are accomplishments that are going to be happening as she begins to clear things out. And hey, let's take it slow. Let's take it a room at a time. Let's do the kitchen. Let's do a cupboard by cupboard. Let's go through these things, but it needs to be a process instead of a quick clearing out. That clearing out is going to trigger even deeper. Laberna, I see your hand up.
The whole time that we were talking about this, I practice, and I know a lot of my clients there, they hoard a lot of stuff. So what I try to do, instead of saying get rid of it, let's organize and see what you got.
Yes.
Can I work with you?
Absolutely.
Because I'm listening to all this and everybody else, and Riley didn't even try to step in and, hey, well, since I'm whoever he is to her, let me help you out. What is this? What does this do? Kind of get an understanding where her head's at.
I love that you're using the word organized.
Yeah,
that's organized. What I mean. That's what I mean by wording and language is important when it comes to this process. When I hear words like organizing, that's more positive. That leads more to taking steps forward and accomplishing versus cleared out, getting rid of, right? Let's organize some things, right? Let's make some piles and determine what is of true value. What are some things that we might be able to let go of? And if down the line is something that you need, we can work together to see if we can obtain this back for you again, right? Word choice is going to be key here. Ryan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, with some of the clients that we deal with, they'll have like a suitcase, they'll have like certain bags. So to help them declutter, I'll say, hey, why don't we take some of this stuff and put it in the suitcase? Mm-hmm. Why don't we take some of the stuff and put it in the bag so they don't lose the bag or the stuff?
Absolutely. Condensing things down, right? Stepping outside of the box to think about how can I support, because this is about supporting your client to the best that you can. It's not so much about meeting the landlord's needs. This is about your client. You are there to serve the client. You are not there to serve the landlord, although it's a big part of the puzzle and the picture, right? How can I support my client in a way to where they can move?
Your bag, I'll put it in.
Yes, to where they can move through the process at their own pace and speed, if we can honor that. Sometimes we can't honor that. Sometimes it's boom, this is what it's got to be. And we got to figure out how to work through that as best as possible. But if there is a process that can happen to make it more of small steps versus big steps, I love that, Brian. Hey, we got an empty suitcase right here. Let's put some of these things in an empty suitcase. Okay, this is the pile that you're not sure of. You need to think about it a little bit more. Let's put this pile in this bag. Let's put this pile in the suitcase. Next month, why don't we revisit it? Go through it again. And then we can discard a few things each month or each week or whatever it is y'all come up with. Because this is trauma that we're dealing with, right? This is not just, I want to wake up one day and I want to be a hoarder. There's something stemming behind it. So it needs to be a process that does not trigger the trauma, that truly supports them. So I love this conversation that we're having. Thank you. All right. Anything else coming up before we move forward, y'all? Yeah, David says it's all in the approach. That's exactly what I'm saying here. Brittany, I see your hand up.
I've also kind of run into like the fact that some of my clients, or maybe like a few, where it's like, you know, I bring up maybe like mental health professional, like in the conversation, oh, like have you talked to them about that? And they're like, no. So they don't take that time that they're talking to that mental health professional to actually address those issues. So my question is like, how could I weigh that into a conversation?
The first great question, and I'm going to open this up to your colleagues in just a minute, but just right off the bat, the first thing that's coming up for me, and we're going to touch on this in one of our slides, is motivational interviewing. One of the best ways to have your participants to start to become aware of themselves or their behaviors is using motivational interviewing. So I would start to bring that into the conversation. And it could be as simple as, oh, I see you have a lot of, let me see, how would I say it? I see you have a lot of nice things in your apartment here, right? Tell me a little bit about that. What is the significance and importance, right? So the language, nice things, if they have it in their home, it's probably to them and their mindset, something of value they want to keep, right? Or something that's important to them. So tell me about some of these things you have in your home, and then just get that conversation, get the ball rolling in the conversation, right? And it might not be a one sit down conversation. It's probably going to be a conversation to revisit, but use that motivational interviewing. Once they start talking about their belongings, then start bringing into the conversation organization, whatever it is, because it might be different for each participant, right? Whether it's organization, whether it's a policy or landlord regulations that starts to now need to be considered, right? Start to bring that into the conversation first by opening up, just having them talking about their belongings, having them talk about their things in a way to where they feel comfortable with the conversation and not judged in the conversation. Does that make sense? All right. Any other thoughts on that? Maybe someone has had the experience with this. Is there anyone that has a response to that, right? You got a participant, they are unaware, and you need to start bringing that into the conversation. Any thoughts on how you could do that, or maybe someone's done it already? I'm going to go to Megan. Megan says, this is great. Thank you, Megan. In the chat, Megan says, get to know them, their history, happy times, sad times, past holidays or lack of holidays, getting them to slowly process their current situation as a little more elevated, or that they are no longer in that previous pain, but let them talk and listen. Absolutely. I love that, right? Start the conversation. And it doesn't have to be about hoarding, clutter, belongings. Just get them talking about the history of their experiences, the history of the belongings that they have, in their space. Thank you for that, Megan. All right, looking at time, we're going to move forward, and we're going to hit the 2-hour mark. Best practices in relation to what are some supports, some structured supports that you all have available. So with that, let me get to it. Structured supports. So we're going to be talking about using coaching as structured support, using reasonable accommodations. We're going to talk about what does that mean, and then using your resources in your community. So first, when it comes to coaching, so being a coach is someone who guides participants to make changes for themselves, either to make changes for themselves, to help them to be aware that the change even needs to take place. And so for that, this is where that motivational interviewing comes in that I just talked about. So bringing this into the conversation, asking those open-ended questions, affirming what's coming up for them and affirming their thoughts and feelings and beliefs about the situation so they feel validated, so they feel seen, so they feel heard, right? Use that reflective listening. Reflect back what they're speaking to you. That reflective listening does two things. It helps them to know that they're being heard, but then oftentimes when you reflect back to them and then they can hear what they've said, sometimes that's when that light bulb turns on. When it's like, they just was repeated back to them what they said, and now they're hearing themselves, for lack of a better word, and some awareness starts to happen, right? Oftentimes when we're talking, we're just talking. We're not really processing what we're saying. But when that reflective listening happens, when you repeat back to them what they said, boom, that's when their processing starts to happen, because it's like they're hearing themselves, right? And then summarizing what they said, what you said, making sure everything is clear, right? So use motivational interviewing as part of the coaching, as your coaching tool. This is one of your structured supports that you have available. All right. And then, also for anyone that needs any more insight or training on motivational interviewing, we do motivational interviewing. We have training and we have learning labs. Check your Centralized Training Academy if you want to understand or learn some more tools when it comes to motivational interviewing, particularly the ORs. All right, again, structured support. This is going to be on page, you don't have to turn there, but just so you can review it later, look back to it later, it's going to be on page 13 in your learning guide. So this is called the Clutter Image Rating Scale. This is a tool that you can actually use with your participant. And it's kind of like let's see, where you show them pictures, right? And these pictures help them to assess the level of clutter, right? And so it's a set of images that shows the same space with the progressiveness of hoarding. So for an example, and this is probably best used for permanent supportive housing folks, right? For an example, there's a picture of a kitchen when it's clean, a picture of a kitchen when it starts to get a little cluttered, and then a picture of a kitchen when it's just full of clutter. And with your participant, you go through these photos and you help them to kind of point out which area they fall into. And sometimes it's that visualization piece that helps them to be aware of, this is what my space looks like versus what it can look like. And then you can have some conversation around that. That's when you can bring motivational interviewing into the conversation, right? You can, for an example, look at the bedroom that's decluttered, it's clean, and the conversation could be, how might you feel if this, what might your life feel like if your environment looked as this particular picture does, right? And start to have some conversation. How are you feeling? Okay, you're pointing that this picture, your bedroom shows a lot of clutter like this picture does. Talk to me a little bit about what you're experiencing, right? How are you feeling? Do you have any anxiety that comes up, right? These pictures also point way to the conversation. So again, this is called Clutter Image Rating Scale. You might see it in your participant guide as CIR, and it's a scale that you can point out to and show you where they're at based off the images. So this is another structure tool that you have. And then lastly, when it comes to the Clutter Image tool, it gives you insight how the participant views their own space, right? Maybe you've seen their space and it looks like clutter, but maybe the picture that they point to is decluttered, right? So this helps you to understand where your participant, where their insight is at, where is their own awareness, right? If there's a discrepancy, that gives you information as their worker of, okay, now where do I lead this conversation, or how can I step into support? My client has a real lack of awareness, or they're aware, or they're somewhere in that gray range, right? And then it can help the participant come to terms with the severity of their hoarding behavior, if it is at the point of severity, right? All right, so that's why this tool is so useful. And then the next tool is the Hoarding Rating Scale. And what this is on page 17 for you all to go back to when you have time and take a look at it. But what this is, it's a brief survey that is designed for your participant to understand the severity of their behavior. So this is like on a scale of 0 to 8. Where does da 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 da, right? And it's a series of 5 questions that's centered around their behavior with their belongings that helps them to understand if they have no problem, if they're in that mid-range, they've got a little bit of a problem, or if there is a level of severity to their problem. And again, after completing this assessment, that's when that conversation can take on a deeper, can have some deeper awareness around that conversation. All right, and then so next we have, check my chat. All right, and so next we have what's called reasonable accommodation. So this, again, this is more for permanent supportive housing. And what a reasonable accommodation is a change in rules or policies to allow a person with a disability equal access to housing, right? So maybe their hoarding disorder is a bit of a disability and it's something that they're working through, or maybe it's so severe that it's going to be a process for them to work through. So oftentimes you can request a reasonable accommodation. And what this is, it's a letter, and what this letter should include is a statement that they have a disability, right? So if for example, if you have a participant who is getting therapy for this, that therapy can write a statement that shows that they have a mental disability and they're working through it, right? So a letter that states their disability or that they're getting therapy, that the rule or policy or the physical barrier, what it is you're asking to change. So in relation to that scenario that we went through with Naomi, maybe the ask is, can you give us more time? And then what might that time look like, right? Instead of clearing it out tomorrow, it could look like, can you give me a month? Can you give me 2 months? Can you give me 2 weeks, right? Whatever that situation calls for, right? That's the change. And then how that policy or barrier is challenging for your participants, a little statement on why it's challenging for them. Hey, it's stemming from trauma, XYZ, they're getting therapy, what have you. And then how they're requesting it to be changed, right? So how are we changing this policy? Instead of 1 day to clear it out, we want to give it a month, right? Some of these things might be reiterating, but these are the key areas in your letter when you request reasonable accommodations. Any questions on this, y'all? All right. And then so lastly is community partners, right? So these are the resources. I don't know if these are in all communities, but I do know some communities partner with resources in relation to hoarding, right? And so some of these are, and again, this is in your participant guide. In pages 19 to 24 have these organizations and resources listed. So the participant's family, legal organizations, cleanup services. There it is. We were talking about cleanup services earlier. I forgot that we got resources for you in the guide. So cleanup services, animal welfare organizations, and housing advocacy organizations, right? All of these are in your learning guide for you all to tap into and explore to see if this can be a resource for you if your client is in need of it. All right, everyone. So we are at the end of our training. To conclude it all and to kind of round things up, the key important areas when it comes to hoarding to remember are: always prioritize the relationship. I understand, we are all aware that hoarding is a barrier for many different circumstances in relation to homeless services. However, the main important priority is the relationship, right? So prioritize your relationships. The tools, the policy, the structured supports are only effective when there has been a trust and a connection in the relationship that has been built. Your participant will be more open to explore all of these different areas and strategies if first they have a connection with you and they trust you a bit. So make sure that you prioritize the relationship. Then lastly, defining success, it's not so much, oh my goodness, we cleared the hoarding issue, right? Defining success is movement from one state of behavior to another. So even if that movement is they were unaware that they had an issue and now they're aware that they have an issue, maybe no action hasn't been taken yet, but now they're aware and they're open to it and they have a better understanding of themselves. That's success. That's a win. That is something that needs to be expressed as an accomplishment. Of course, the goal is always housing retention when that is a part of the support that you all are working towards and giving. All right. Any questions before we close out, y'all? All right, so as per usual, and I mentioned this at the beginning of our training, this is our first time doing this training. This is our first time facilitating this topic. So we would love your honest feedback on the survey. You can scan that QR code or in the chat section, I am going to put the link to the survey. I put that in there. All right, so there's the link to the survey as well. Please take a moment, a minute or two to complete that. Give your honest feedback. We want to understand if this is hitting the mark for you all, if there are some things in this training that you would have liked for us to discuss or be a topic of the discussion and we didn't put it in there. Let us know because we're going to fine tune this based off of how you all are receiving it. And thank you so much. If you do not have time to complete the survey now, you can click on the link in the chat. It'll open up in a separate desk browser and you can fill it out when you have a free moment. But with that being said, thank you. I really appreciate the discussion that we had. I'm so happy that now this is a part of our training library because I know this is a barrier and an issue for many of you. And as always, I appreciate you all. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I understand the time and dedication and effort and energy that you all are giving each day. So thank you all so much and hope to see you in another of my trainings soon. Have a great rest of your day.